So to be in time, hello again, everybody. Dear participants, dear colleagues and friends, and thank you first, Jöris, for this kind introduction before the break. So I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this panel discussion under the motto, Rebuilding the Trust in Science by Strengthening the Basic Norms of Good Scientific Conduct. This term, rebuilding of trust, implies in a certain way an almost complete loss of this trust, which is to be regarded as the elementary basis of research and all kind of scientific cooperation. My personal hope is that we do not have to deal with a total loss of confidence, although it is undisputed that there are and must be considerable and justified doubts about numerous scientific studies, especially on the subject of COVID-19. And it has certainly led to a widespread decline in trust in science and to the integrity of scientists in general. Of course, this is also a central issue for ENRIO, and as Jöris has reported earlier, already in April 2020, the network has published a statement on the essential importance of research integrity, especially in times of the pandemic. There is certainly an enormous amount of work to be done to regain lost trustworthiness and to ensure that the public, the society that needs and is waiting for answers, can approach the results of scientific studies and findings with confidence and reasonable expectations for improvement. There is hope that it can succeed, and the guests of our panel discussion certainly have, from different perspectives, suggestions and proposals that can be helpful in restoring and particularly fostering the essential trust in science and the people working in it. So a very warm welcome to our wonderful panelists from different European countries, and I will briefly introduce each of them and their fields of activity afterwards. We have Nicole Foeger from Austria, Henriikka Mustajoki from Finland, Loreta Tauginienė from Lithuania, and Panagiotis Kavouras from Greece. And I'd like to start with Dr. Panagiotis Kavouras from the National Technical University of Athens. He is originally a physicist with degrees in materials science and technology. And in summary, he has been working for several years in research on solid waste management. During the last years, his main research interest was focused on research integrity and responsible research and innovation by participating in several Horizon 2020 funded projects, Science with and for Society. He delivers training seminars on research integrity for postgraduates of the National Technical University of Athens, is involved in various research integrity awareness raising activities in Greece, and he's having a monthly column on research integrity in a Greek newspaper. So Panagiotis, my first question is for you and relates to the field of collaborative research and the reliability of the results and findings of such projects. So what are the challenges, the pitfalls, what can be seen as advantages related to our issue?
Thank you very much, Helga, and good afternoon to everybody, our panelists and our audience. It is a real pleasure that participating in this panel within the ENRIO network. So I would like to begin very briefly with something like a historical introduction. Collaborative research has become the mode of doing research due to the so-called technological convergence, meaning that new fields of research have emerged some decades ago, like nanotechnology or cognitive science. There you need many people, many researchers from different disciplines coming together and work together and produce a meaningful research outcomes. If you also take the soft projects, you have an even greater diversity in the disciplines that must come together. You have philosophers, physicists, medical doctors doing research together. But it is not only for technical reasons that collaborative research gains prevalence. Also, there are organizational reasons. Research becomes more and more expensive. So you have to have a pool of resources brought together. That means that you bring together universities, sectors, industry, small and medium enterprises together with the academia, countries, or even lay people, as citizen science is doing right now. So it is characteristic that in some countries you have half of their spending in research going to international collaborations or research funding organizations that they request international cooperation. And of course, there is an even increasing percentage of papers that have an international authorship. So with regard to the risks, so beginning with some, let's say, negative connotations, if I may say, and then I will pass to the positive connotations and to the benefit that collaborative research brings. I think we are all well aware of what ethics dumping means, meaning the application of double standards in collaborative research across countries or sectors and even across disciplines, meaning that you just put a consortium member which has gray areas in some with regard to the guidelines of research ethics or in research integrity. So you can make research that would be otherwise prohibited, or you had to pass through many waves of ethics appraisal to have this research being done. Also, it is the interaction between, in some cases, it is the interaction between industry and academia, meaning the public sector and the private sector in doing research. I remember the motto of the European Commission that was said, the outcomes, the results of research should be as open as possible and as closed as needed, which is very correct. But for some, let's say, private sector research performing organizations, this sometimes was abused, meaning that despite the fact that they had some research funded by public money, they wish to keep for themselves the outcomes, even if it was not completely justified. Of course, you also have the ethical concerns and research integrity concerns about intellectual property rights for projects that in which also citizens participate, meaning people that are not professional scientists. So these are some of the challenges that collaborative research has brought into the forefront. But there are also many, many benefits, and this is the positive, the very strong positive connotations that collaborative research brings. It has been proved through researchers, or we have very strong indications, at least, that collaborative research is more impactful, as it has been quantified by the citations that the published, the peer-reviewed papers obtain, that they bring international consortia. Also, it has been proved that nations that encourage cross-border collaboration tend to produce paper with higher scientific impact, meaning that this extrovert character of some countries is even stronger than their policies to spend more money, meaning that despite the fact that some countries spend more money than another countries, but this country that spends more money is introvert, does not foster international collaboration, does not produce such impactful papers. Also, it could be said the side effect that teams, it has been proved also that teams with greater ethnic diversity generate as well more impactful papers. And this does not have to do with the networks that each different researcher brings, but it has to do, despite the fact that it is not scientifically, let's say, proved, that people coming from different cultures, scientists that are brought together into the same laboratory or into the same consortium are having something like a cross-fertilization effect, and better ideas come into play. Also, and closing my, let's say, remarks, it also relates to fostering research integrity, meaning that bringing together, fostering international cooperation, you have a more reliable research. I would just like to refer to a project, it is called Refresh, that analyzed 53 clinical trials from the last 5 decades. 10,000 of these clinical trials were made from research teams placed only in the UK, 40,000 of them from authors from the continent, while 3,000 from authors from both the UK and the continent. And this project proved that these cross-continental clinical trials had lower risk of bias scores, meaning that they had a more sound and more robust methodology. So the environment is dynamic, and the pandemic has brought extra incentives for cooperation, not only because it produces more impactful results, not only because it produces results that are seemingly rely on higher standards of research integrity, but also you have the need for speed. So if you will be able to have international cooperation that can share work, this work can be done faster, but not by compromising research integrity. I would just like to finish my this short, let's say, presentation by saying that right now Europe seems to be the most extrovert region in the world, despite the fact that China seems to be fast catching up, at least with the United States, in terms of the impactful on the impact of the research is produced. We should be also aware that research collaboration is also affected by geopolitics, and this we should keep also in mind, because this kind of international cooperation does not grow in the void. It has also some limitations that has to take into account. So this was more or less what I would like to present with regard to research collaboration. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Panagiotis, and I guess there will come up some questions about that and your very comprehensive remarks. And I would like to continue not only the various collaborative and cross-border research projects. Open Science has taken on a very special role. And it is that's a good transition to our next panelist, Dr. Henriikka Mustajoki, who is currently the chair of the Council of National Open Science Coordination in Finland. And there she applies her knowledge of research ethics and integrity gained through 20 years of research and teaching of research ethics in the United Kingdom, Australia, and Finland. She has developed organizational and national curricula for research ethics and open science, and has published books and articles on making ethical decisions in research. And creating responsible research practices is a passionate field of interest for her. So Henriikka, in which concrete ways could the open science movement be supportive in regaining trustworthiness in science?
Thank you very much, Helga, for the kind introduction and for ENRIO to include me in this panel this afternoon. I was thinking when I saw the topic for the panel, and I came up with 4 things that I think open science plays a really crucial role in maintaining and rebuilding and developing trust in science. The first thought I had was that open science is really a two-way street. The one part is the research community and about sharing the nitty-gritties of research, and it's about being two-way even within the research community. It means that as researchers we need to share, plus we need to listen. We need to be open to the others and what they are sharing. But at the same time, that sharing, that two-way street goes with the society. Open science provides us with tools and opportunities to engage with the society, both through sharing more research results, but also through citizen science and other activities to get the rest of the society to engage with the research process. And through that two-way street, that engagement, I think we are building trust. The second one that really the open science can bring to the research and the trust issue is about, it's not just about sharing our success stories. That is essential, that we share the data and the processes of the really successful research projects. But open science is really also about sharing the unfinished, the not so successful research stories. It is a way, now that we've got the kind of technological digital mechanisms, finally we'll be able to share negative results. We'll be able to share algorithms and our protocols. And through that sharing, we will be able to have the space to identify what is good quality research, what is trusted knowledge, because we can see how that knowledge has been built. That, in many cases, requires some research knowledge, but the idea of peer review being at the heart of our understanding of how we identify research quality, open science gives us a whole new spectrum of how we can deal with that peer review and involving more and more people at looking at research in a lot more diverse way. And I also think open science provides us with, through policies, and new types of standards that are going to be really valuable. And I see, not just through my own personal interest in research ethics and integrity, that open science and research integrity will need to have this ongoing, really intricate dialogue. Panos mentioned the slogan, "and open as possible, as close as necessary." The open as possible goes with the open science, but the close as necessary needs to be defined carefully. And that definition of what is as close as necessary has to be informed really deeply with the research ethics and research integrity community. We can't have this one without the other. And once we can show that interaction, that we are looking at openness as one of the core values in research, we don't think it's research if no one knows about it. We don't think it's research if it's not peer reviewed. It's really in the core values of research. And once we take that openness in its new digital format and make sure it interacts with research integrity, I think we are on the path of creating trust, both within the research community and between the research community and the society. So that were the kind of the 4 remarks that I had prepared to kick us off on this panel. Thank you, Helga.
Yes, thank you, Henriikka. And of course, to rebuild trust, one important aspect is the good scientific practice and the research integrity. This is quite clear. And there are, of course, many strategies and measures to ensure and maintain it. And they are part of the daily work of ombudspersons. And this brings me to our next panelist, Dr. Loreta Tauginienė. She is the Ombudswoman for Academic Ethics and Procedures in Lithuania. And thus she is responsible for handling allegations and providing training on research integrity, as well as fostering changes in an academic environment to develop the culture of research integrity. Furthermore, she's associated researcher at the Finnish Hanken School of Economics and member of the editorial board of the Journal of Academic Ethics. She contributed as guest editor and author on more than 20 publications related to academic and research integrity, social responsibility, public engagement, citizen science, and responsible research and innovation. And last but not least, she's also a member of the ENRIO Transitional Board. Loreta, quite often this concern is expressed in discussion that national organizational structures established to intervene when research malpractices, when misconduct occurs, undermine academic freedom and autonomy of universities. What do you think? Is that so? And if so, why? How?
Thank you, Helga, for introduction. Just to answer this quite a broad question in a very short time, I would probably like to emphasize a couple of points. The first one, I would suggest recalling some European Union documents that discuss what academic freedom is. And definitely it said that academic freedom should be respected. And it's very natural that academia take this as their own skin and prefer to rely on academic freedom as the way of doing everything on their own way, in the way they do understand some matters, and specifically in the research conduct. However, among these EU documents, we should also recall another document, which is also very important, and it is a European Charter for Researchers and on a Code of Conduct for the recruitment of researchers. And in this charter, it is said that academic freedom is not unconditional, which means that it has limitations, and the limitation to this freedom should not contravene ethical principles and practices, specifically when conducting the research. So when we speak about the pandemic situation and we see that the number of papers related to COVID-19 continue increasing, but again, this is also the number of retracted papers in this topic also increases. And it gives a bit of deliberation and critical thinking what is happening in current times. Whether researchers do research specifically on COVID just because they think that academic freedom allows them to do in the way they prefer, or it definitely we should following and respecting research integrities in any times. It doesn't matter would it be pandemic time or not. So this is what is very important, I would say, when we discuss about the pandemic situation, about the research integrity, and what is happening in the research environment. So this is my short message to all community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Loreta. Well, another very important aspect of the topic, and it was mentioned already several times, is communication and sufficient information. And I'd like to introduce now Dr. Nicole Foeger, the Managing Director of the Austrian Agency for Research Integrity. She's holding this position since 2010 after having worked for several years as a researcher in biochemistry in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. She's involved in all research integrity activities on the national level, including trainings for researchers, advising in all matters of research integrity, and supporting the Independent National Commission. From 2012 until 2018, Nicole was the elected chair of the European Network of Research Integrity Offices. And she is involved in several European initiatives and EU projects on research integrity as project partner or member of the advisory board. And she's also a member of the governing board of the World Conferences on Research Integrity Foundation. Nicole, regarding the understanding within interdisciplinary scientific project, it is quite clear that the researchers know that they all have different focuses. However, for people without a scientific background, it is more than difficult to understand and classify the different opinions and point of views. And this, also combined with expectation and hopes, could lead to misunderstanding, overinterpretation, and loss of confidence. How could researchers, as well as the scientific community, could counteract?
Thank you, Helga, for the introduction. Thank you to the people I see, and thank you to the participants I don't see to be here today. What struck me most was that we heard a lot of different opinions and diverging opinions every day, you know, on the newspapers, we read them, we heard them on TV, we heard them on radio. And of course, the opinions were different ones because the researchers came from different disciplines and had different backgrounds. So, you know, we heard the virologists, the epidemiologists, we heard also mathematicians, the statisticians, and then finally psychologists, psychiatrists, and even economists, and I guess many more. I cannot mention all of them. And for me, having an academic background, I completely understand where it comes from, what they are telling us. But for people who probably have not engaged themselves so much with science and research, I think it was difficult to understand who is the right one and maybe who is not that right. Just to give you some examples, so there were different opinions, but also changing opinions. And I think it is clear for me, because the more you know about the virus, of course, the more precise you can say, you can say something about what should be done or what should be avoided. So we had, you know, at the very beginning, researchers saying we don't need masks because they don't stop the virus. Then they said, you can just use any mask. And then we came to all of us have to use the FFP2 masks. Then we had kids are the super spreaders. And then we had, no, kids can be infected, but they are not the super spreaders. Then you could see everyone was disinfecting everything, like in Austrian metros. There were even some specific cleaning stuff, you know, cleaning all the day, the metros and the seats and everything you could touch there. But now, since several months, I have not seen anyone there anymore to clean anything. So obviously it was also not that important. So this combination with, you know, hearing every day, maybe sometimes it even seems every minute, at the news, on TV, at the radio, also listening or reading the newspapers and all these kind of things, blogs and whatever it was. There was a heavy overload of information, and you could even, I mean, it was even not really too easy to avoid it because it was just everywhere. And there was also a very speedy communication of researchers with the public. So what I could see is with more and more of these restrictions and regulations and lockdowns, I think there was less and less understanding of the general public for all these changing theories and opinions about COVID-19. And I cannot even say a lot about communication with policymakers, because usually we were not present at this kind of communications. We just saw the outcomes. So I think a good thing about the COVID-19 was absolutely that research and science have never been that visible to everyone. Like every day something is on the newspapers, on TV, on radio. But on the other hand, there was also some loss, I think, of trust. And it would be super nice if we don't only have a good scientific practice, but something also like a good scientific communication with the public and the policymakers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole, for this statement. But of course, it leads to another question. How could this be realized, this better communication, maybe inside the research groups, maybe inside science, but also, of course, towards the public? And this is a question, of course, to all panelists. So, who wants to start?
If I can continue, I thought it would be also important to learn this during the studies, you know, like being educated how to do this. And I also checked that there are some guidelines out there, you know, for researchers who quite often have to talk to media or to the public, but I don't think that it's that this responsibility is within everyone's head already.
If I may continue, I think what Nicole's saying is something we need to do right now, but it's also a very long-term process. Understanding, as Nicole, you pointed out, it takes quite a bit of background knowledge to understand that even if two researchers are saying something different, if they're coming from different fields or different things, it doesn't mean that science is broken, but it is in the core function of science. And having more and more people in society who can actually listen to scientific information with enough background knowledge, and that's going to take some time. And we have citizen science type activities that allow people to have that first-hand experience in research that allows them a whole new perspective of what does it mean. It has to come all the way through schooling. It has to be in that sort of long-term vision. But at the same time, the way the research community communicates the everyday now things, you'll have to kind of give it a bit of background whenever there is opportunity to allow people to start developing the knowledge in order which way they can interpret scientific information, and the complexity of turning a research knowledge into policy. It's not from research to policy being a simple step. There's multiple different steps. It's a very complicated system. So I don't think we can fix it quickly, but being aware of the fact allows us to do that. And I believe, for example, citizen science is one of the, at the moment, probably underused opportunities that we've got to gain that better space for communication. Thank you.
Also, if I may, Helga, if I may, Helga, one, I think, as I said, cardinal issue is the way that general public see what scientist is, because they usually have the icon of a very wise man doing research and taking decisions that are always right, that are always correct, and they all want to save humanity and things like that. Scientist is just a human being that makes mistakes. She works hard, and he should be very certain about his or her uncertainty. This is something that was on the balance, because they expect from a scientist to have ready to have facts, but scientists, when a scientist does not have facts, I mean, to be sure about what he or she is saying, then things get complicated. When this panic situation was from the pandemic, I think one of the very difficult issues was also that we were saying almost in real time discussion between policymakers and researchers. So from the one hand, you had the scientists who did not want to be evasive about questions, but he should leave a margin of uncertainty, while on the other hand, the public would like to hear good news, and the policymakers could always play the game of putting the responsibilities to scientists. So I feel very relieved that that I am not a virologist or epidemiologist in a very prominent position in a country, because I think they have an extremely difficult work to do.
No doubt about that. I mean, what they report in certain interviews and newspapers, it is really not funny at all what they are confronted with and what they also have to suffer about. That's true. Loreta, something.
Yeah, just by recalling what has been already said from the three panelists, I think that what is important to emphasize, or let's say to discuss and not to postpone for another day when the time will be convenient, is first of all somehow to reframe the picture of the scientists in these days, because we do see some publications and books that have such titles as innovative researcher, engaged researcher, and it implies that much more roles a scientist has, and somehow this person who conduct research should deal in somehow. So what I would like to underline is that we need to discuss right now that all these uncertainties that Panagiotis mentioned should be sensitized in ethical terms and discussed now, but not afterwards, because to my mind, later it will be a bit too late. And the harm that can occur because of postponing these sensitive questions, these ethical questions that could be connected to all kind of research, it doesn't matter would it be related to COVID or not, could really make bigger harm, and it could be hard to deal with that afterwards.
Thank you, Loreta. And I also think, I mean, there are always different levels, but what is the role of institutions like universities, like research institute, in this sense that they can also rebuild and foster on a local, on an internal level, maybe also in the idea that they have to strengthen their members, because it's also always individual researchers who are confronted with doubts and who are questions in their daily work. And they also have to find a way to react and to act. And what role could these institutions, these universities play in this sense? What do you think?
If I may continue, I would say that the role shouldn't change as the current roles universities have. But what is probably essential is not to leave them alone in this field work, and just to facilitate their work in helping and assisting them how to deal with any kind of issues they face every day.
And if I may continue, one of the way researchers, at least in Finland, feel when they are in the public eye in any shape or form is rarely positive. And if they are left unsupported, I think that creates a threat to open science. It creates the threat to building trust. So I think organizations need to really carefully think of ways to support researchers, particularly early career researchers, so that we'll have a diverse research voice in the public discussion. And at the moment, I think researchers quite rightly are concerned about what might come their way if they venture out in public, particularly if it's a hot topic like COVID or climate change or dietary restrictions or whatever it is, that we really need to, for the purposes of open science and integrity, be really serious about the support they need.
Maybe Helga, if I can continue, I think you mentioned it before, but some of these researchers, they were even threatened, like they are going to be killed and this kind of thing. So it needs a lot of support by the universities and research institutions, of course. Something they probably have not heard that much about before, but I think that was something they got every day, which is really bad.
Yes, as I said, for some of them, it was really simply horrible. Thank you. So I would like to turn to the audience and ask the participants, or concretely ask Annie. I guess there are some questions.
Yes, thank you, Helga. We have one question that deals with the language of scientific publication, and it goes like this. So, considering the international research groups, should we promote the creation of research and the publication of the research in other languages? Because at the end of the day, those publications with the highest impact are the ones published in English. And this could be an issue to be considered in order to promote the communication outside the research community.
Yes, thank you. So, Henriikka.
I'm keen to start. This is very close to my heart and the work we do in Finland. And I gather all of us on the panel represent language groups other than English in our constituency. And the question is absolutely, we need multilingualism of research and science. We need to reach different sorts of audiences, and if the country is making its policy decisions in languages other than English, they need research knowledge and research vocabulary in the language that they're working in order to be effectively able to include scientific research in their decision making. And what we probably need, we've got the Helsinki initiative that has been quite successful in promoting, and we know there are other initiatives out there as well, and the new UNESCO recommendation on open science takes scientific multilingualism very seriously. But what we probably need to look into is where our roads often lead, which is assessment. We need to start thinking, what are the ways that researchers, for example, can publish the same research in multiple different languages, and how we can assess that, how that's going to be done so that our rules and understandings of integrity and ethics are maintained. But we probably need to look into the rules around publishing and multiple publishing. What is plagiarism and self-plagiarism? How can we republish in multiple languages so that we meet the needs of the society, maintain research integrity, and allow career advancement for those who take scientific multilingualism seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Henriikka. I don't know if Panagiotis, you wanted to add something?
Well, actually, I was I was writing an answer, but I just canceled it since this question was brought to the to the audience. I would just like to add that it's not only an issue, as Henriikka mentioned, about the communication with the non-experts. Also, there are discussions with the increasing prominence of China as an innovative country and a huge country, of course, that also the English as a lingua franca of communication between scientists is slowly coming into question. For example, in a few years, we might have Chinese journals that publish highly innovative research only in Chinese. So this might also become an issue not only for communication with lay people, but also for communication between scientists. And in addition, if I may say, it might not be directly relevant with what we discussed, but this perhaps finding a lingua franca not in language, but in ethics and integrity might be much more, let's say, effective in communicating between different languages than find one language or use a multilinguistic, let's say, approach to our communication.
Thank you. Any comments on that?
I could only agree.
Okay, so Annie, there is another question as far as I can see.
Not in relation to the panel, actually, that was more of a Congress question. So nothing else from the audience at this point.
Okay, so I guess we can slowly come to an end of this panel discussion. And I want to thank you for your statements, for your very comprehensive remarks. And from my point of view, there were two main keywords or issues. The one is, of course, as always, communication is the outstanding keyword, and communication inside, of course, the research groups, but also, and more important, towards the public and towards those who need to understand more about the challenges of science and scientists. And also, of course, to those who are in the political positions, that they have to take decisions based on scientific results and findings. And of course, there has to be a better, a more profound communication towards them as well. And the other one is as open as possible, as closed as needed. This was also for me one of the very important keywords or key sentences, because it is important for of course, the collaboration, but also for the understanding of the non-scientific public. It could again lead to misinterpretation and misunderstanding if you are too open. So you have to find a good balance. And this is, of course, a challenge that we are all facing, and we are facing it now. This, I also agree, this is nothing that we can postpone, not even until tomorrow. It has to be done right now. It has to start. It started already, and it has to continue in a very powerful way, I guess. So I want to thank you very much for your contribution, for the discussion. Yes, I guess I have to hand over again to Sanna. Thanks again a lot.